Alright, let's get into chapter 4 and see if Bertha and Gus are upset at Charlie for getting in trouble at school. I figured Bertha was going to be mad at me for kicking that girl, but she surprised me by putting her arm around me and saying, "Tomorrow's a new day." Then she gave me a little squeeze and added, "Personally, I love those boots." She didn't say one word about my inappropriate behavior. Mama would have hollered at me, reminded me for the umpteenth time that I'm a troublemaker just like Scrappy. After supper that day, we had blueberry pie for dessert, and I got to make my wish. If you cut off the pointed end of a slice of pie and save it for last, you can make a wish when you eat it. I learned that from my cousin Melvin, who swore it had worked for him when his brother ran off and got married and left him with the whole bedroom to himself. I knew Gus and Bertha were watching me cut off that pointed piece and push it to the edge of my plate, but they didn't say anything. Even Bertha had been kind of quiet during supper. Maybe she really was mad at me for kicking Audrey. Maybe she was thinking, the apple don't fall far from the tree. Maybe that night in bed, she and Gus would whisper to each other about how much I'm like Scrappy and what in the world they'd gotten themselves into when they agreed to let me stay with them. After I ate that little pointed piece of pie, I made my wish. I went out front to watch Gus do some weeding in the vegetable garden. A fluffy black cat rubbed against my legs, purring up a storm. I wrote my name in the dirt with the stick and then scribbled it out. There wasn't one blade of grass in that yard, just dirt and rocks with sprinkles of color here and there, patches of wildflowers nestled around the clothesline posts, the pink blooms of a dogwood tree over by the driveway, a neat row of daffodils lined up like soldiers along the edge of the chicken wire fence that surrounded the garden. Gus whistled while he hoed and around the tiny tomato plants, stepping carefully between the pole beans and zucchini that were just beginning to poke through the warm spring dirt. On my very first day in Colby, Bertha had said to Gus, "Let's take Charlie on a tour of the garden." So I'd followed along behind them while they pointed out each little plant, telling me how the pole beans were going to climb up the twine and the zucchini would have giant yellow flowers. I had nodded and said, "Oh," because what else could you say about vegetables in a garden? But Gus, you'd have thought he was at the Garden of Eden, out there the way he took care of it, examining each new leaf on the okra plants or moving a squash vine off the walking path. So while I scribbled in the red dirt, Gus whistled and hoed. Every now and then, he tugged on the bill of his hat and swatted a mosquito. I could hear Bertha in the kitchen talking to some of the cats while she fed them, scolding one of them for killing a bird, telling another one he was getting too fat. I was about to go on back inside when something caught my eye. There was movement behind the tangle of shrubs that separated the yard from the woods. The black cat darted off, disappearing behind the shed over the garden. I stood real still and squinted into the darkness of the woods. All of a sudden, a dog poked its head out from behind the bushes. A skinny brown and black dog with long, floppy ears. The same dog I'd seen fighting that afternoon. He looked up at me, cocked his head. I took one slow, tiptoeing step towards him. He ducked his head back a little, watching me. I took another step, and quick as lightning, he ran off into the woods. "Dang it," I said. "You say something?" Gus called from the garden. "There's a dog over there," I pointed to the bushes. "Brown and black, floppy ears." "Yeah," I said. "Did you see him?" "Nah, but I've seen him plenty of times before." "Who does he belong to?" Gus propped the hoe against the fence and sat it on the lawn chair in the yard. "Just an old wild stray," he said. "Been hanging around here for months. Bertha keeps putting table scraps out for him. He don't mind eating her meatloaf, but he don't want nothing else to do with her." I looked toward the woods. "I bet I can catch him," I said. Gus took his baseball cap off and scratched his head. "That old mutt is mighty skittish." "If I can catch him, can I keep him?" "I think that dog would rather be stray," he said. But I knew better. I knew what it felt like to be a stray. Not having a home where somebody wanted you. And he was a fighter, like me. That dog and I had a lot in common. I was suddenly overwhelmed with love for that skinny dog. I made a solemn vow and promise to myself right then and there that dog was going to be mine. Did Charlie just find possibly her first friend or first thing that she likes in Colby? I hope so.